Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. Let's do this, guys. We got a big show planned for you guys. But first, we want to let you guys know that we are sponsored by the Virtual Fight Tour, and May 28th it will be the next one. So we are excited. We have some time now to get ready and get pumped up. So I can't wait to hear what is coming up next. So
yeah, it kind of seems like that might have been a good move. Like if we were going to do one in April, we were going to kind of rush it. So I feel like pushing it back is going to give us some time to really get a really good card out there for Virtual Fight Tour 8. Virtual Fight Tour 7 was dope. So if we push that back a little bit just to make the whole card, better. So it's not just like one or two matches that is good. We get the whole thing better. I think that's a good move.
Pretty awesome. All right, so we got week 2 of our, what do we call this, roundtable discussion.
Yep, exactly.
About forms and weapons. Last week we had an awesome episode with Jackson and Sammy, and this week we have some awesome legends from pretty much our age group.
You said it.
Pretty much. We got Marcel Jones. What's up, my friend?
Nothing much, sir. Nothing much. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And we got Mike Welch. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we got Lauren Kearney. How you doing?
Doing well, man. How's it going?
Awesome. Great. So we got Georgia, Florida, Wisconsin, all in the house with us. And, man, I mean, I'm not sure if any of you guys got to check out our episode from last week, but we kind of went all over the place. We kind of talked about a lot about creative forms, a lot about some things that we thought were good right now, and maybe were some things that need to change. So
what I thought was great though, Jeff, was both Jackson and Sammy, they kind of told us and told everybody that they almost kind of like identified as like a mid-2000s competitor. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? They were like, well, that's when we first started competing was then. Right. So you're really thinking about that. So when you think of mid-2000s, Mike, Marcel, Lauren, their eyes were on you guys during that time, big time, not just then, but now as well. So like Marcel, how old are you now?
36.
36. And Lauren, what are you?
I'm not ashamed to say it. Thanks for asking.
Oh man, hey, we said same generation. Lauren, what about you?
I'm also 36.
Now see, Mike, I know how old Mike's gonna be, but the reality is Mike is like eternally 32 years old. Like I don't know how it happens. Like somehow he like when like the next year goes, like physically he goes back a year. Because you're gonna hit a milestone this year, right?
My back, man.
Are you gonna hit a milestone this year?
I am. I'll be 40 years old in September.
Wow.
He's the black belt Benjamin Button, I guess you're saying, right?
That's what I'm trying to say. Because it's like you say, like Mike Welch is 40. You're like, no, man. He's got like 3 years before that happens. Yeah. But like, no, it's like for real. Like somehow, like in my eyes, like you're always 32.
For me, like the mid 2000s, I kind of stepped back. I think from like individual competition, and it wasn't until I started bringing Team Infinity back with Team Demo and everything. So when Sammy and Jackson, like if that's certainly they're not saying that was their prime, but that's when they really started getting going. Personally, that's when I started like moving on to focusing on the schools and careers and things like that. So it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but really, I guess mid 2000s is what. I mean, where are they thinking? It's like 2004, 5, 6, or mid 2000s, like the 2010s.
Well, what is that reference point, Alex? Is it between 2000 and 2010?
I think they were talking like 6, 7.
Yeah, because that Sammy is at 2007, start. But to comment on that, I think that the reason why they identify with that is because, people around their age right now and or that started competition then had us as their instructors and influencers, right? And so obviously our culture, our beliefs and mindsets as a martial artist and our approach, we were obviously, translating over to them. And I think there are some people that may be the same age as Sammy and Jackson, but they didn't start at the same period. And so that's probably why they don't have that same identification or association. And I don't think it's an indictment on people their age or the younger generations. But a lot of people now are kind of self-taught, and they really don't have a full-time or significant instructor presence. They may have somebody look at what they do, but the concept, the methodology, the technique, the talent, they foster themselves, and it's not honed in or matured by other people from other generations, right? That's my opinion.
I think what I can agree with 100% is like the current. Are you talking about current or like Jackson and Sammy? I think either way.
No, I'm talking like current, not Jackson and Sammy, because I mean, even the people their age, but like you have your team, right? But there are so many people now. You look at the tricking competitions, and somebody just slaps a chop punch to the left and right and does a form, and you're like, hey, who do you train with? You're not hearing my name, Lauren's name, your name. You're not hearing your Carmichael. You're not hearing they're part of a school. They're not part of
but they are training with like the top guys now. You know, I think Reed and Jackson, they do a ton of private lessons. I'm sure Sammy's, Sammy had Kyle and a handful of like solid competitors. I think a lot of kids are out there working with the top competitors. They may not be like strictly with just one dude, but I see the top competitors now are. I mean, they're funding their competition.
No, I'm saying, but the top competitors now aren't working with people from our generation. So I'm not saying they're not working with people, but they're not working with people from our generation, right? So Sammy and Jackson can identify with the mid-2000s because of us and our age group. But to your point, there's somebody that's 14 or 10 that's working with somebody that's 18, right? There's almost a 20-year gap. So that's what I'm saying.
Are you guys still, Lauren, do you still do lessons? Jeff, are you guys still teaching private lessons to like active competitors?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Not as far, not the same volume.
I try to resource out sometimes. Like the things that I'm always looking for and that I'm hard on, like I'm always going towards basics and I'm going towards the things that worked for me like a long time ago. But if they need like some sweet new bow tricks or some sweet hand combos, like I've got to resource it out. And I have Team Infinity to work with, but some of the kids that I work with, they'll go to Jackson and they'll get like a killer bow form. They'll get some really good choreography, and then I can work with them to polish it and make it a performance. And, so he and I will complement each other in a way like that with just one student. So
let's stay on that point for a moment, Mike. Let's stay on that point. What I think was so interesting, what you just mentioned was you got Team Infinity, not just the Infinity Martial Arts Schools. You got Team Infinity, and even you're still looking at someone and looking at who they are and what they have and going, I might have to outsource out to this. And that's certainly not letting pride set into that, because you could go, I'm Mike mother effing Welch. I can put some stuff together for you, but you didn't. And I just feel like I found that interesting at first, because I wouldn't have thought that maybe you would have done that. I'd have thought, of course you can handle that. You know what I mean? But what's an example of something like that you've done in the past?
So many of, not even the past, like just current, the recent, last 5 years. Like I said, I have guys that I work with on bow, but they've also worked with Jackson or like Ben Jones or somebody to get some another perspective and get like the latest tricks and choreography. I think there's certain things that are winning, and it's not what I do or did. I don't know if that makes sense when articulating it right.
Right.
I also think that there's a curse to that same side too. I think there's too much.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Yeah. I was gonna ask about that.
Like just B&E did. Here it is. Here we go.
Go for it, Lauren.
Go ahead.
Here it comes.
This is a great transition point, Lauren.
I agree that there's some curses to that, because then you look and the way that the sport's going. And I think we heard it last week with Jackson and Sam. We've heard it in a lot of the podcasts that you guys have done with some of the newer generation, that they're going, I have to do this because it's winning, but I'd really like to be doing this, but I know it's not going to win. And you go, well, I think we've kind of opened the door to this gaping, widely interesting conversation of, hey guys, Isn't that an interesting place to be, that the sport is where our judges and our promoters and these people who are in the place of leadership are like, everything's great. And it's like your own top athletes are saying, but I think we need some curricula. I think we need some sort of rubric. We need something, because for this to continue growing, we have to have a standard. And right now there's zero. So it's just, well, what's the guy that's hot doing? And
then
from my
talking about that.
I'm like, I don't necessarily like some of this stuff. I think it's cool. I'm not gonna frown on that. I'm gonna be like, yo, that's super cool. I just, I laugh because I love Madaming, but I can remember being at Charlie Lee Nationals and watching him spend 15 minutes trying to do a sidekick correctly. And that was Madaming in like 2007, where he was like, I'm just gonna stand here and try and do a sidekick on both sides, like Gemma Nguyen sidekick, just like boom, and 15 minutes of that.
No,
maybe like a Jeff Goff sidekick.
Right, like just sit here and try to do something.
It did not happen. There's no way that happened.
There's totally no footage of it, I guarantee you. But something so silly, so simple, and it was like the introspection that I think our generation had of, I could do all this cool stuff for that time, but that doesn't stop me from going to the basics and the core of what martial arts is and going, but can I still do all of this really well? And I think there were parts. I mean, I frequently talk to Marcel, and I love those conversations where you go, you know what we did at 2 a.m. when we got to hang out? Basic stuff. We weren't like, hey, let's see who can do the craziest manipulation trick, whatever. We were like, how are you actually training? Because something you're doing, I'm not doing, and maybe I just need to kind of like figure out how to implement it into my existing schedule. Because what you're like, I don't have hands like you. I would love to have hands like what's going through your mind? What is the thought process going into this as you're making it? That was probably my favorite thing growing up with Casey, because we were so similar, is we had conversations like those analytical and those theoretical conversations all the time about, well, what are you doing? Like, how are you training this? And then we started competing against each other, and we became very, very cognizant of the fact of we probably shouldn't have those conversations, because now this just got harder. Because I know what you know and you know what I know, and this kind of stinks. So
I want to comment.
You had to have a point where you were like, thanks, but no thanks.
Never. No, even to this day, I'm like, hey man, like the hand, obviously, especially now that Canada's.
No, I'm talking about with Casey. Did you you had to have a point where it's like, yeah, I'm not letting you in there.
No, because our theory was always, growing up, and even then as we started competing as adults, it comes down to what you do on the day that it matters. Nothing else besides that matters, right? Like if you have executed your training correctly, when we get in there, even if we train the entire time together, it will ultimately come down to this 90 seconds of presentation. And you could botch it on the dumbest of things. And there's plenty of US Open tape to show you how we both botched it plenty of times to go, all you had to do was get through the form because she already messed up. All you had to do, and you still messed up. And so it was very, very much I don't know, maybe it was a generational thing of like, I don't want to beat you because you didn't hit your form today. It was, I want to beat you because you hit the best form you've ever hit today. And then I know that I'm progressing.
Right. I want to comment on two things. The first thing that Mike talked about, and, there is, I think our generation, a certain level of selflessness, right? Because the age that we are, our responsibility and obligations outside of extracurricular activities, like would preclude us, like, we know, look, I don't have the time, or the energy as I used to, right? I'm not traveling to a tournament, so I don't know your competition. I know what you're doing. And since I don't know your competition, I'm going to outsource, right? Or, get somebody else to work with that. And the thing that I think this current generation has a problem with, and I think it is an issue, is to Mike's point, he'll say, hey, you know what? There's this really cool trick or these really cool tricks that this person has that I don't do or didn't do, to your point, right, Mike? Go to Jackson for that bow. And the person, and I'm not saying Jackson does or doesn't have a certain skill set, but I think the person will get enamored with learning the tricks from Jackson and not go back to Mike Welch to work on the bow striking and the bow basics. Right. And so even if they stop working with Jackson or continue, they're focused on the tricks because they heard what they wanted to hear. Tricks are winning. They didn't hear you're getting beat by this person, right? Our generation, I'll speak for me. I never heard Kalman Choka's butterfly twist flash kick is winning extreme forms. Nobody else was doing it. So clearly, if he was getting first, you could easily say the B twist flash is what's winning. Nobody ever said that. They said
nobody else was attempting it.
And the person didn't try to learn a B twist flash to beat Kalman Choka. They improved their basics. But I see people now, they're like, oh, this person threw their bow in the air and it spun 7 times and that won. Not the person.
Not the person.
So they try to learn both tricks and they don't come back to the basics and they're not improving, right? That's what I see. And so I'll say, hey, go to the Presleys and have them work on this. They have a brick and mortar karate school. They can foster your talent there and work on that. Yeah. But, that's what I see personally, because I don't see people doing chop punch drills. I don't see people.
Speaking of chop punch.
I don't see anybody hand on the wall, chambering their leg and getting their, hips going for basic kicks. They don't even do a basic kick in the form. We got jump front kick with no reach hand.
Right.
Oh wait, what's Jackson chiming in with? Read it, because my eyes are bad. I don't even have to see it.
Yeah, and I'm not. That's what I said. I'm not saying he doesn't or does have those basics. But to that Jackson's comment, right? I'm not saying that he doesn't teach those things. I'm putting the onus on the student, right? Because I think that there's not a lot of self-accountability, right? You're told to go work with someone because of a specific skill set. And if that person you feel has other skills or talents that they can transpose to you, keep working with them. But that person did a trick I can't do. So let me learn that trick. And they don't be like, do you realize you don't have a front stance also? Do you realize your form is 15 seconds too long also?
Right.
Do you realize you did one strike combo in the very beginning also? Right. And so you're just not listening. And then you get someone that's going to hold them to account for all the areas they need to improve. And next thing you know, they're like, you know what? I got first at the last tournament. I'm just trying to get first at the next one. I don't have 6 months to, invest with you, beating me up with the basics and fundamentals. I'm going to move on. And then it's just wash, rinse, repeat, That's what I see.
Right. Michael saying every once in a while we get a special student. We don't encourage them to work with others that are better. In the Midwest, we have, what is this? Rusa Mapes, Ron Dodson, Jim Hartley, Mark Long. I am 70 years old, old enough to know that I don't have all the tricks, which is all right. So that's a guy, he's at least understanding where he's at. So self-awareness is super important to know that.
Right.
To know, like, all right, if I have someone who is beyond my ability, then it's probably good to outsource them and say, listen, I've done as much as I can because I just am not that great. While I'm getting there, I should go work with this guy in the meantime.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to the best guys out there, like, so I mentioned Jackson a lot. I brought him in for camps and I have sent students to him. And I think somebody like him, he's at the top of the game. He's always winning, but he's got a full package, I should say always winning. He's a coach that will show basics, that can show the tricks. And he does have a mindset of like a sports martial arts athlete, how they should win. I think Marcel, there's definitely that element where there's coaches that all they'll teach us tricks, and then there are those kids that's all they want to learn, that's all they're going to do. And I don't know if you see them go to the top.
Yeah.
I had a different vision when I said that the curse is that people will go to the best, and where we are now, when we were all competing, if you look at Jeff Doss's form, Marcel's form, my form, Steve Terada's form, Lauren's form, Kim Doe's form, you're going to see how many I list off there. Very, very different forms.
Yeah, all different.
Now across the board, I think the curse now is that everything just looks a little too similar. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And people do stuff to stand out. Don't get me wrong, but all in all, everybody who's chasing that first place, the cream that hasn't risen quite to the top just yet, it's just a little bit too repetitive. And,
right.
And somebody talked about the judges controlling that, Lauren. I think maybe you did.
But I think that goes back to this whole idea, though, of like what Marcel said of, I'm just trying to win the next tournament.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is predicated on this entire scoring system of we're going to go to standard deviation. So like probably my best learning experience that I can recall as an adult, Brennan Hewer, who arguably is one of the most underrated people I've ever seen on the sport karate circuit just because of how versatile he was.
Variety.
Yeah, like he did everything. He did forms, he did weapons, he did soft, he did hard, and he was great at all of it. He was creative as all get out. But he sat in a ring and he was one of my 3 judges, and I'll never forget it. It was at the New England Open when I'm pretty sure Rich Baptista still owned it because I don't think I competed at it when Joe owned it. Right. So it was like, that's how long ago it was. It was like 2007. And I remember sitting there and he gave me like a 997 or a 998. I think it was a 7 because I was like,
I was doing my Rich Baptista impression.
Oh my God. And I went up to him and I was legitimately like, hey man, what did you see?
Like, did you make a mistake?
No, it wasn't. But it wasn't that. I think that's the attitude that's changed because I've heard it around the tournaments where they're like, the judges don't know what they're doing. And you're like, or they have a pretty good idea of what they're doing and it doesn't match with right now. Right. So when I went to him, it was more that conversation of like, I would really love to sit and pick your brain and go, what did you see that you didn't think this was a 9? Because I would love for you to define what a 9 is and see if I can facilitate that. Not you messed up and you don't know what you're talking about. It's on me. And I don't see a lot of that in tournaments now. I don't see a lot of I lost because I didn't do something. I see a lot of I lost because the judges doesn't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Well, what you said is you mentioned a couple things. You said, I like it, Holly. You said, is that form a 9? Like, what makes it a 9? Right there.
Yep. That's
to know what makes a form a 9, what makes a form an 8, what makes the form a 7. Do we really know what that is? We know what that is as competitors, but then when the judge goes there, is it the same thing? Are they seeing what we're seeing? Like a lot of times, no, because they're not in what we're doing. They're not actually.
There's no rubric
performing with what we're doing. So whose definition of what a 9 is what we should be looking at. Like, what is a 9? That's what we need to figure out. What's a 9? What's an 8?
There's got to be a better system instead of. I understand why it's the rating the way it is ranking them instead of giving a score. But I think in the long term, that is where we get that murky kind of thing and we're not seeing the growth because no one knows, like you said, no one knows what a 9 is, what it takes to get that, I mean, I could have my worst form of the year and still get a 9 because I was better than everyone else. I could have,
that's okay if that's the answer.
Than me. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. I'd rather, even if I still won, I'd still rather get scored the way that I should get scored. Then I can go back and I have something to work on. I really think it's confusing as well to new students and new competitors as well. Because I've had that to like yellow belts, orange belts come like, well, I got a 7 this time. And, last time I got a 3. I'm like, well, yeah, but there was only 3 people in the division.
The score is irrelevant or moot to the point, right? That they're not looking at their performance. Exactly. I think Lauren and I have talked about this, and I would like to get everybody's opinion that cares to opine on it. So I think there was something that was missed in either our generation and the ones before it, right? And instilling certain character traits in the talent, because I never said, oh, I got an 8 this time. Next time, let me get a 9. I know we never said that.
Right.
So how did that logic, how did that thinking find its way, not into a student, not into a school, but into a generation, right? Because it's a whole generation that has that thought process. Did our generation drop the ball with not being honest, blunt, right, and truthful with what needs to take place? Because I know I am with my students, right? Yeah. I know I am with people in general, right? So what happened? I know young Juan doesn't, mince words, right? So where do you guys think that disconnect took place? If it is our generation that dropped that ball, or maybe younger generation that are adults, maybe they started it. I mean, is it that 25 to 30-year-old that didn't do something or did do something material? Because it is a pandemic, not an epidemic.
Well, we also have the ability in our activity. People have the ability to go rogue and do whatever the heck they want, right? And still just show up at a tournament and do whatever the heck they want. Heck, if they want to just sit in the middle of the ring and pick their thumb, it's their time. They paid their entry fee. They can do whatever the heck they want. So, I mean, yeah, if they're not being accounted, if they just choose not to listen to the advice they're given, it's an individual competition. You can't cut the person. It's not like a team sport. They can do whatever they want. But what has happened, I think more what you're trying to say, though, Marcel, is it's now become common practice. And I don't know the answer to your question on that one.
Yeah, it's standard operating procedure for some reason. And there are people, there are some great talents, regardless of their ranking. And there are people that I do believe are winning that stand out that don't have that thought process. So let me be clear on that, right? I love Ben Jones's work ethic, right? Just, period. There are certain people that you do a lesson with them or you see them in a seminar, they just do whatever, right? But there are some, I don't know how you could go train with a Lauren and allow out of your orifice to say, hey, this one, like, do you understand the backslap that's coming your way when you try to educate or edify someone as accomplished as Lauren or Mike or myself about why something's winning right now, right? I have people that, can you put this in my form? Well, what is this? An opening trick away from the judges. Why? Because other people are doing it.
Right.
But you don't even have one. So I could put a trick in the beginning of the form, but who says it's going to be good, right? You didn't come to me and say, hey, I'm tired at the end of my form. Can we work on cardio? You didn't say, hey, my flash kick barely landed. Can we work on getting that higher? You didn't talk about fostering and developing what you're already presenting in the competitional, arena. You're talking about net new that is yet to be shown improvement. I don't get that concept. Don't teach. Like that's like somebody saying, teach me how to invest in money. Let's make a real world example. Hey, show me how to invest and make money grow in stocks. But no. How about I teach you how not to spend the money you already have, so you can save what you're already getting, and then we can track that trend. And then once that is solid, now we can talk about aspirational wealth.
Right.
I digress.
I get a point. I want to get Mike to say.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Well, you triggered a thought. It's probably a little off of Marcel's topic, but you triggered it like, I got to have this in my form, right? I got to have this in my form. That's what kids are saying.
Yep.
Can you believe in 2021, probably 95% of forms, open hand, extreme musical, still have a flash kick from the corner with a pop front kick to follow it?
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, I know.
That's one thing that drives me absolutely bonkers. And I say to people, if you can't do a flash kick as high as Shaquan or Alan Davis, then don't do a flash kick like that in your form ever again. Do something different, please.
Mike, I want to use that as a point right here. So we've talked about this so much, like the common theme has been, this is what everybody's doing, so I've got to do that. This is what everybody's doing, so I got to do that. I'm going to dial it back to 2006. It's the Diamond Nationals. Marcel, you know where I'm going. All right. So Marcel was staying in my house that year. You remember that? He stays with me.
Yes.
And I'm like, now we've been tight at that point. We've been tight for a number of years. All right. Became friends because he and my brother were competitors with each other. All right. And then that's how we got to know each other. It's really how we all get to know each other. So anyway, Marcel wins. He's in the finals. So I'm like, yo, man, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm not going to do any tricks. This is 2006. I'm like, time the hell out. It's time out. What do you mean you're not going to do any tricks?
I want Lauren to chime in after this.
If I do a flash kick, they're going to compare it to Steve Terada's. All right? If I do my twist combo, they're going to compare it to, and I'm not, please forget if I remember who was in it that year. I forget.
Maybe Mark C.
Maybe it was Mark Ananizzato, right? If I do this, they're going to compare it to that. So I'm not going to do any tricks. I'm like, I don't know, man. This sounds kind of ballsy. And end result, Marcel Jones was a 2006 Diamond Ring winner. Beat them all and did no tricks. Literally a creative form. And everybody's mind was just like, what the heck did we just watch? Right? Did we really watch a form with no tricks win a forms overall? Like with everything? Yes, we did. So he showed it to like, just because this is what everybody does, forget that. Kick rocks with that. It don't matter. Right? What's your form like?
Well, the reason why I said I wanted Lauren to chime in, if you don't mind, after this, is because, well, Alex, I'm glad you brought that up because we haven't talked about that probably since then. So that's more than 10 years ago, and you remember that. So to go along the self-accountability thing, right? That was me in 2006 being accountable for deficiencies. I was willing and able to say what I was not good at publicly. I wasn't bloviating about what I did have. I was talking about what I didn't have. And I didn't necessarily have to say this person had it better than me. I just knew they would compare it to them. Whether that's good or bad, I want to be evaluated for what I did. And the reason why I said Lauren is I think I've talked to Lauren about it more recently. And I was very specific with my flash is not, at least in competition, higher than Mark Ananizzato's. That's a fact. There's nothing to be ashamed about. He has a great consistent height to his tumble moves, whatever they are, period. And mine was not at that level. Corkscrews, I could do one. Was it higher than his or somebody else's? So no. So it's like,
exactly.
That's just, I don't know. And I'm not saying people don't think like that, but I don't see them take action on it, right? I was willing to go to the grands and not do those tricks. And then the next year, I decided not to do music ever again in grands.
Do you think if more people thought like that, the result of competition forms look very different? Like there'd be way more individuality in the form?
Yeah.
Because he didn't say
people still with that mindset. I really
didn't say don't do a flash and don't do a jump front kick in that sequence. You didn't say that. You said if it's not better than, if it's not at a certain level of quality and expertise, then don't do it. Right. So we're not beating down the competitors of any generation and preventing them from doing what they feel like doing or what they're comfortable doing. But we're reminding them of the quality and the expertise that needs to go along with that execution and performance. And I'm not sure people say that. They see someone do an aerial. They want to do an aerial. That person pointed their toes and had straight knees. Do you know yours don't? Right.
Right.
Think about that. And I know I communicate in that manner. I believe you guys do the same way. I'm not quite sure if everybody from our generation is, and that's why I talked about that disconnect. Somebody I don't think is articulating certain points.
So with that though is, Lauren, you talked about who really helped you train in Casey, right? I ain't had nobody. All right, I surpassed. Not that I didn't have anybody. I don't want to say that. I had surpassed the coaches that I had at that point for extreme. Because Catherine Miller at that point, oh man, she was a great forms coach.
Phenomenal.
She then moved to Washington D.C. in 2000. So I'm like, she ain't around. What am I gonna do? So I really was that point. I was just figuring some stuff out with a few guys. Right. I don't know what was it like with Mike, Marcel. What was it like with you guys?
I never had private lessons for forms and stuff. It was trial and error, going to tournaments, copy this, make it my own, try something new, and then just the dudes that I was with, Team Extreme, baby.
Right.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Green room.
Yeah.
For me, no private lessons.
When I look back at some of my forms from like the 90s and the early 2000s, I cringed. Oh my God. I could have used a coach, man. Oh, I cringe these days.
No private lessons, but I do remember in Georgia, we would pick a school or location, and I love Calvin. We're best friends, and what I love about his mom being engaged in martial arts and being a martial artist is, we would like spar. And then after sparring, everyone would do their forms and we do it in sections. And Ms. Chopra would, watch and give us tips and pointers. So, there wasn't a consistent private lesson instructor, but we were willing and able to get critiqued from our peers and, people that we respected in the arts. The reason why I don't think private lessons were a thing for myself or our generation is because the discipline and the methodology was ingrained in the school's culture, right? Mr. Juan doesn't have a kick team that he sprinkles some special seasoning on weekends during practice. How kick team practices as a team, the underbelts are doing on the mat in class, right? Mike Conroy isn't throwing some special Team Elite CJB stuff, right? It's in the school, and I think, and, I would, Lauren, you chime in, like, I feel like our instructors and the schools we came from, it was grained in that. I came from Joe Corley. Clearly, the Bob Atlanta was one of the biggest sport martial art tournaments for a while. I'm pretty sure the instructor base at his schools, the franchises, had a mindset and a culture that they, were consistent in executing, which is why you had people like myself and Cowman, Chesson, come from, at different schools.
Yeah, last week, just that I think the biggest thing we're missing is like sport karate schools. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think.
Oh yeah.
Especially, and that was something for me. I know it's big time in NASCA was that it was the one school, the one student from this school that let's get him to the good private lesson, whoever's the hot private lesson coach, and then let's push him and let him represent our school, and hopefully he'll get on a team, and there we're off to the races. Instead of it being like a sport karate team that all is together, you know what I mean? They're a unit from that school, Mike, you're one of the few ones I feel like that still does that in NASCA and in that group. For me, that's what kind of got me into doing the NBL was because there were school teams, and it was a way for them to work from the ground up, from underbelts all the way up to black belts, and they had something they could follow and do. And I think that's where we miss a lot with this, We've talked a lot about the good thing about outsourcing and stuff, but some people outsource to like everybody, to where you have one student and they have 10 private lesson coaches, and it's almost, they don't really have an identity,
a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's also they don't have an identity of who they haven't really gotten to be the best with that coach. You know what I'm saying? That coach hasn't really gotten to mold them into something and then let them go under there. So I think we see a lot of that, I'm not sure where everybody else.
Because kids they also do every single division.
Yeah.
They might be a really good tricker, but they're also doing traditional weapons, traditional forms, creative weapon. They're doing literally 8 forms divisions. So they have 8 different coaches. And sometimes it's like, focus, man.
Yeah.
Narrow it down. What are you good at, and focus on that.
Yeah. Because again, I don't need you to teach me a musical form, and then this guy teach me an extreme form. Like, really, it should be similar, right? I mean, and then now we talked about this last week as well, and I think that is an issue and why a lot of us, we see the same form by one person 4 times during the weekend, right? Just with different music and things. How can maybe the rules change so that way every form has to be a little different, right?
You just nailed it. The rules have to change and the judging system has to change.
Big time.
How?
Somebody's got to take ownership and leadership and go there.
Yeah.
What is it?
2 ways. A league has to dare to do it, take the ownership and make it happen. And the second way is the competitor's got to commit to it. You know what I'm saying? It's a new challenge where maybe the top guy doesn't win every single division that he's used to, because the rules give an opportunity for somebody that's not the style. Well, let's just call it what it is, the NASCAR style, right? So if they're not the NASCAR style, but the rules allow somebody to win without a NASCAR style, so that might, it's hard. It's hard to go against the norm to make the change. I know talking with some of the guys from Promac, like Joey Perry's got good ideas.
Yep.
He wants to make changes. Jeff, when you were a promoter and we had tons of conversations. And sometimes I thought I was like, that's so far out the box, man. That could never work. And now I'm 100% on board, like criteria, multiple scores for each form. There should be a technical score, athletic score, this score, that score. Every judge gets 4 or 5 scores, 3, 4 scores, whatever.
Right. Wait a minute now, Mike. Jeff's got great ideas. Jeff also thinks there should be one judge.
Here we go.
Jeff also thinks judges should stay in opposite hotels.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. No. Opposite hotels as the competitors. I'm saying if
Jeff was thinking quarantine before COVID. That's what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that if we want to look at things as bigger than what they are and not how they currently are, we have to make changes even in the perception of things, right? So having judges hanging out all the time with the competitors and the parents, that does not help our sport whatsoever. And so if a small thing of having a competitor's hotel and a judge's hotel is a small thing that can happen across the street from each other to make the sport a little bit more professional, I don't think that's that big of a deal. You know what I mean? And now some people, their first response is, yeah, but I want to stay with my team. Okay, but again, you're still thinking of how we currently have it.
To that specific point, to Mike, I think the rubric or the criteria, like you said, we just need to dare to put it in there. And it has been done. Let's talk about our generation and the generation before it. Before it was creative, it was American hard, right? Was there not a clearly defined rule to what American was, what Korean was? There was. And people in that generation followed accordingly, right? They didn't go inverted. They didn't go more than 360. They stayed upright. There was criteria. What I will give everyone over the past 20 years credit for, even the current generation, they will do whatever it takes to win. I feel like they have whether they execute properly, I think they are willing to entertain the idea of doing whatever it takes to win. That's why they have 10 different instructors, right? So there's something there to a degree, right? We actually, in my opinion, and I haven't read the rule book recently, but I think there's more defined criteria on what is permissible and what's not. CMX can't go inverted, can't rotate more than 360 degrees, right? The first few years of creative, remember, we couldn't do front or back rolls. Right. I got disqualified in Compete National in 2005 for doing one. Then they changed to where you could do a roll because it was looked at as a traditional element. Right. Those are current rules, right? So I think instead of saying what everybody can't do, in order to create that transition and evolution, we need to start saying what they have to do. Right. We say for extreme, and in order for it to be an extreme form, you got to go more than 360 degrees. It doesn't say you have to do a single leg kick that rotates more than 360. Right. So it's going to force you to do a 720 2 feet or a 720 1 foot or 540 because the rule specifically says a single leg kick with more than 360 degree rotation. For creative, we say you can't flip backwards, but if we say you have to do one of these 3 ground elements, front sweep, back sweep, right, forward roll, back roll, we're going to see at least that, right? Side kick. You have to do one basic kick element. To Jeff Dawson's point, NBL has no problem saying you have to do 3 kicks without putting the foot down. Yeah. People have acted accordingly. Yeah. So I think we have already historically put things in place to evolve the sport, and we just maybe plateaued. And now we need to modify it. Instead of saying, don't do this, you'll get disqualified. We need to say, you need to do this in order to get a score.
Yeah. That was something that was done years ago. NBO did that years ago. And so, there we go. They had like 5 different things that had to be done, right? So you had to have at least a hand combo of 5 consecutive hands. You know, you had to have some type of 360 spin kick. You had to have some type of jump spinning kick. You had to have something either landing in, even said that you even had to land into either a split or a stance. You know, you had to have 3 kicks without putting your foot down. Now, again, that eventually went to, well, let me do a triple kick. So in the air, you know, so there was different ways to kind of do it. I don't know. I mean, I know why they got rid of it, because they just felt like the reason why it was put in place was so that way the judges had something to judge everyone on in a basic type set and be like, okay, yes, did they meet this? Yes, they met this. Let me kind of rank them based on what they did on that one, you know, at least to give them an idea of how to judge it, right? But no one was really doing that. It was just more of, okay, they did all that, they're passed, good. Now let me judge them.
They did enough to check the box.
Yeah,
moving on.
There wasn't a purpose for it after. It didn't go into the score. You know what I mean? Like the way it was originally intended to.
Which I think comes back to what Richard's saying in the chat, because Richard made the comment, we need younger officials. And I can remember it was the last Empire States, and it was my first full year of competing. It was the year of like the crazy young bow staffers that were like, holy crap, these kids are so unbelievable, right? Like the Wayne Douglashes, the Matt Alcar, like just these.
Yeah.
Like what you imagine a Jackson Rudolph and a 9-year-old, and you're like, and
that was kind of Wayne, yeah.
The thing was, because you put Joe Greenhall as a center of anything, and it's going to be sheer comedy. And it was like a panel of 5, and I was sitting, which I don't see happening as much anymore. And I think this is what started the whole thing with Sammy and them. Is Sammy was like, bring back the forms, whatever, and I was like, it's because nobody's interested in sitting side ring and watching these kids as much as we were once upon a time. But I can remember sitting side ring, watching the boys 17 and under, because that's what it was at the time. There wasn't all these divisions. It was just weapons.
Right.
And it was like Wayne and Butch and Matt Emig and like there were all these kids, and it was like, good Lord, anybody could win this. And poor Joe Greenhall and Rich Baptista, who were sitting like center and 4. And then they had Jerry Fontanez as the side ref or the side judge. And Jerry Fontanez just kept looking at me and was like, I don't know what to do. These kids are amazing.
I feel like that as a judge sometimes now. As a judge now, like if I'm judging grands, it doesn't matter which grands it is. Very rarely is it like so obvious who the winner should be. And to have criteria like that would make judging for me much, much more enjoyable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what he just ended up giving everybody the same score, and they were mad at him because it was like, "Oh my God, you've just ruined this division because you kicked all 7 kids."
So my job, as a judge, you have to pick who do you think is first instead of how do you think that form was. I think we've come full circle now with that statement.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We at least have a criteria now where we can go, all right, I've seen them all. I think that guy should be first. We at least can kind of do that. But like the Jerry Fontanez thing,
they didn't break any rules.
Right.
Well, and you know what? I think the big difference too is like Marcel saying he got disqualified for doing a forward roll. Is you had somebody who was brave enough to say, I don't really care what you think of me, i.e. Charlie Lee, who was like, that's not allowed in the rules, and I actually know them because I wrote them. And you're like, oh, but if I walked up to a judge now and I was like, so what's the rules for this division? They're like,
yeah.
Can I ask everybody a question? This has been bothering me so much, and I've asked for things to be specific, and people have said, yeah, we're going to address it. Never gets addressed. Marcel, what are the rules in creative? You can't what?
You can't go inverted. You can't rotate more than 360 degrees.
So, butterfly twist.
Say it again?
It's not specified, Jeff.
Is that illegal moving creative?
One would say no, but if you take off and land, that's a 360 degree rotation. But I think the reason why B-twist for the general understanding is not allowed is because too many people don't consistently have their head at hip or above hip level.
So how about a 540 kick? If you land on 2 feet right now, they call it a legal move.
Right.
If you do the exact same kick and the exact same rotation.
You said if you land on 2 feet, they call it illegal?
Yeah.
You
do it illegal.
540,
like a double leg 5.
It's legal. 540 land on 1 foot, they call that illegal.
This is the same rotation.
Done properly is horizontal 360.
Well, so like for me, I specifically teach taking off at the front at 12 o'clock. But I think some people will start their takeoff with if you do a 540 with that rotation in the air, you're going to take off with your back to the front. So you're going to rotate more than 360 degrees in the air. But for us, if we take off, chamber leg and we kick over and land, like that's 360 degrees in the air, and the hips don't rotate more than that, feet on the ground or not. So I think it's it's called a 540 for a reason, because of if you take off with that leg, in the air chambered beforehand. So I think
with instant replay, you can go back and look and see if it was a legal move or not. But generally speaking, if you do both of those techniques the right way, I mean, Al, what do you guys think?
So Jacob, you said the right way.
So how about
have a defined way?
Okay, if you do a butterfly kick, that's perfectly legal. Everybody says butterfly kick, legal. But if you do a butterfly kick and you go inverted, of course, that's illegal. Right. So butterfly twist, just off the top of your head, some judges call it illegal and they'll DQ you. Some judges are like, I don't know, and they'll dock you. And some judges don't have a clue and they score it like it's totally fine and creative.
But it's legal if you put a kick in there. So it's the same thing. It's still a B twist, but with a kick. But if you do it with a kick, they won't DQ you because that's something different, It
drives me bonkers. And I've been told by some officials a butterfly twist is illegal, but it's not written in the rules that butterfly twist is an illegal move.
Right.
Even if you do it. And so that kind of crap gets on my nerves really bad because it still exists.
Yep.
And that's why we'll never, ever get to the next level, because we can't even fix that one little stupid thing with a 540 and a B twist. We're never going to get to, here's the criteria. Here's what the judges need to be judging on. You're going to give 3 scores. Everybody's committed. We're training judges. ProMac is doing a good job certifying and training judges. Mm-hmm. But they're not that far away from, they're polishing what we currently have. It just isn't getting to that next level like we're all talking about.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back even a step, though. What are they trying to accomplish with the 2 divisions? What is the purpose?
Well, that was
what
back
was told to us was the purpose is because at that time, like in 2004, when that switch happened, the tricks were so ridiculously insane. They were like, all right, someone like Jeff Doss, you can't beat these guys because you don't do tricks like that. And Jeff would be like, kick rocks. I do beat these guys. Right? We all grew up watching Anthony Murata beat Steve Torrata.
Yeah.
That shit happened. Sorry. All right. But it was advertised as, okay, now this is a division where you get to do, open, creative karate moves. It's focused on the martial arts. And this one is extreme. Go flip your butt off. All right. Because you have to do an extreme move where you go inverted or go more than 360. Whereas this one's going to be focused on the martial arts. But what the competitors found right away was, I'm going to toe the line as much as possible so that it still looks like extreme, but I don't technically cross the rules. So what do the judges want? What do the promoters, what do the officials want?
So another legal move is a swing 7, right? If you do a swing 7, say you go scoot swing 7, you're technically spinning 540 degrees. Right. But the judges aren't calling that as anything illegal by any, I don't know what the difference is, but that move is more
execution. The execution, and I think Jackson brought a point up in the chat, and I agree with it's like the terminologies I match in the generation, right?
Correct.
If the rule says you can't rotate more than 360 degrees, why would they ever allow a move called a 540?
Right. So just change the move, and they could say it looks like a 540. But I call it a super tornado kick.
There you go. Yeah.
I call COVID-19 mega death, but one thing that I thought about the 540 specifically, I get your takeoff proposition. I get your initial landing one, but how consistently do people take the non-kicking leg and set it down without doing that spin? How many people do a 540, whether they take off at a certain point or not, and they're not consistent or controlled or balanced enough to put that non-kicking leg down immediately into a chop punch versus 540 and they're spinning on one foot. So now that non-kicking leg has been in the air more than 360. The hips have rotated on one.
The ground. Once your foot touches the ground, you're on the ground.
The right foot touched the ground, but the non-kicking leg, the left leg hasn't. You see what I'm saying? So
that's okay. Once you touch the ground, it's no longer an aerial spin. I can spin as many times as I want on one foot in creative.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it has to be
right. That question right there is not defined.
I didn't think you could spin more than 360 degrees. You know,
you can pirouette.
You know, I think to your point, I remember
that's not defined.
I remember someone. I'm not going to say who because I know who's like. You had people early on when creative. The new wave of it, right? Because, you know, we had creative before, and Jeff and Lauren can attest to this. Everybody, you know, American and, you know, this and that, and they just modified it, right? So I think we definitely have the framework to just modify and evolve. We just need to pull that trigger. But I remember people looking at how far you bowed, and they were so quick to call that out to a judge and say their head went below their waist, right? Now, you could say that's somebody that's trying to adhere to the rule book, or you could say that's somebody that is a sore loser / sore winner. I don't know. Pick your poison.
Yeah,
right?
that first year, too, was really – I mean, I remember I got told that because I did a grab like this, that was extreme. So, you know, that you know, and it was just kind of like, all right. My problem from the beginning anyway was that the name of it. Don't name it creative if all you wanted to do was us copy forms from 94 or 93 or whatever, which is what they originally kind of started saying. Well, we want you to do this. I'm like, okay, well then call it we already had the American division. Really is what it should have been anyway. It was American style traditional, you know, American freestyle forms, you know, karate open style forms. But I mean, so my problem is when people were trying to get creative within the rules, that wasn't really being scored, you know, the way it should be since it's called creative. So I don't know.
Well, let's look at it for a little bit. It did start to trend towards progressing the right direction. In the late 90s, we had American hardstyle and we had Korean. But really,
yeah, but Korean wasn't Korean, right? You were doing a scissor axe in a.
John Valera was winning.
Korean was the creative division, really, in a lot of ways.
Exactly it. He wasn't doing choreo.
No.
Right. He was doing a creative form.
The thing was, though, is this idea. So it's not specific to any generation. So we're very clear. It has always been. There's at least one or two people who read the rules and go, well, everything I'm doing in this form, I learned as a Korean stylist, or I learned as a martial artist. So none of this is beyond the realm of what it is you think is allowed in this division. Therefore, since I, the judge, don't really know what I'm looking at, I go, oh, well, they did a good job selling a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, and I bought it. But you do have that, and we've had so many issues for the last 12 years. I mean, and the one that pops into my head is it was a big blowout between Rudy and Josh Kahn at Competes one year because they both did butter knives, and his was okay and his wasn't okay. And they were like, how do you justify that his exact same move is okay in the creative division and his move, which is exactly the same, is not? And they were like, oh, because his head went below his waist, but his head didn't. And it was like, it kind of seems like you guys don't really know what you're looking at. And so I look, and someone actually said in the comments that it was like to have traditional against CMX stuff. And you're like, if the scoring was such that it wasn't predicated on you can't do certain things, it was more descriptive of like, if you do a creative form, our expectation of that form, however you facilitate that, is this.
Yep.
If you do it and this has always bothered me because I think first of all, I think I don't want to say it's non-existent, but it's pretty freaking close. There's nobody out there doing musical forms that are choreographed right now. It's very, very, very limited. And kudos to Mason Hill. And that was, I think it was largely because of Derek Egan's dad, because 2 or 3 years ago, he was the closest thing to it. And I would love it because I was like, yo, Mason's running a form. And this was right after he came back from an injury. That is arguably one of the easiest forms for that age contention of people to do, but he's beating everybody. And the people he was at the top of their game and that were doing the craziest, hardest forms. And their argument was, I got to do this. I got to do this crazy hard form. And you're like, but the judges have no idea what you're doing. Right. They don't know that backside 10, hook, sweep, gainer, double cork, miss the leg, whatever it was that you did was that hard. I don't even know that. And I've been doing this for 30 years. Like, I don't know that it's hard because I physically can't do it. And true story, I probably never will. However, I looked at his form that was a lot more basic and was like, wow, that looked more impressive.
Execution.
So, yeah. And the same thing happens nowadays, right? That's the reason why someone like an Ariel Torres or Jarrett Liker can come into a division, Jose Castro can come into division and run a solid trad form and destroy the CMX division. And you're like, wow, that was awesome.
Right.
And everyone's like, oh, but it's not as hard. And you're like, yeah, let me see you run that form.
Right.
And you tell me then that it's not that hard. And you go, that's a bunch of baloney. It's as hard as it looks. They've just perfected their craft so much, which I want to give Jared a big shout out because I think a lot of people don't realize it. But and they talked about it I think it was last week or maybe it was the week before about how traditional Once Upon a Time was so different.
Yeah.
And I think we need more people that have that mindset of
what kind of traditional are you talking about?
What do you mean?
Well,
everything, traditional forms specifically.
Well, so when you say Jarrett really was a Korean stylist, right?
Right.
And then just one day.
But that's why you got to give him kudos is because here was somebody, and I don't see this in this present generation. I saw it in glimpses of it in other generations. I will be the first person to say it wasn't me. I think the closest thing I got was with Casey, our idea collectively as a synchronized form of going, hey, I'm not going to fit the norm, and I don't care how many times I lose. This is the way it needs to be done. And eventually it will catch on. And you don't see that now because there's no right. Like the competitors at this point have to demand the change. It's the opposite of an Apple approach, right? We're hoping that the promoters, the Steve Jobses, create the product that we need, even though we don't know we need it. And you go, they're not doing it. They don't know how to do it. That's fine. I'm not bashing them because I've never been a promoter. I have watched my friend promote multiple tournaments and it's hard. And I got to give those guys kudos because you're like, what they come out at the end of this is not worth the time that goes into it. Right. However, kudos because you love what you do. And I'm grateful that you've given us a platform to do this. However, the athletes in the sport, which you see in every other sport right now, have to demand the change. And they're not doing that either because this is part of their livelihood. And if I'm going to lose,
how do they demand the change?
Because of this, I'm not going to demand the change because you're like, well, but if I demand the change, it could affect my bottom line. And you go, I don't want that to happen. And you go, but if it's for the betterment of the sport, would you really not do that?
What should they do?
That's the reason that things aren't changing is because competitors continue to keep going to the tournament. After every tournament, this conversation always comes up. Every major tournament, every time we've said it, everybody's talking about, including promoters and judges and blah, blah, blah. But nobody makes a change because people are still buying the product.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and if so my thing moving forward is if COVID has taught us anything, there's 3 things that I hope we go back to. And I don't think it will happen right away because we just spent the last, call it 18 months, give or take some, with virtual tournaments and occasional in-persons. And the ones that are coming back, they haven't really done anything to change.
Right.
I have a couple of things that I'm like, man, I'm a little nervous. And I've expressed this internally with our Paul Mitchell guys is I'm like, I'm really nervous at the fact that you guys haven't been training to potentially, I don't know what they're doing. I'm obviously not with them all the time, but I see a lot of these kids and I'm like, what you're doing is not going to help you get better at what we do. It might get better. You might be a better person, but not specifically at what we do. And I think that's largely hinged on the idea of poor communication because obviously, I mean, up until like 2 weeks ago, it was, is there a US Open? Is there not a US Open? Who knows?
Right.
I have no idea. The Battle of Atlanta, it was like, well, I assume it's happening. They had one last year in September. I'm going to guess they probably are going to have one in June. Okay. What about the rest of the tournaments? Is there a tournament in July? Is there not a tournament in July? And you're like, well, I need to know these things to be able to properly prepare for them so that I'm not trying to I'm not going all in right now. And I peak in June and I show up to my first tournament with all this ring rust on. And the first thing I do is blow out a knee or blow out or whatever. Right. And that's a big thing that I'm like, COVID aside, which is an entirely conversation that could take up 2 hours of this on. You go, they haven't done anything. And a lot of these kids have been training in
promoters.
Right. And you're like, oh man,
they haven't made any changes.
Right.
The stupid stuff about what we were talking about, rules, opportunity to improve, opportunity to train judges to really fix
anything. This is all a great time to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah. I mean, I was really excited, Mike, you and I, when we first started doing some of the virtual judging, and we were like, this could be a change for it. And we were doing really well for the first 2 months, and then just kind of nothing, and no one else really wanted to go along with it because the other leagues wanted to keep it the same way they've always done it because it's easy for them. And the people
say, "Oh, I'm not sure about this. Oh, I'm not sure about that."
Right. Yeah.
Because it wasn't the same. It wasn't the norm.
Exactly. And other people were winning that weren't normally winning. So, I mean, there's that. So, well, I don't want to support that league that,
right.
There's things like that, and there's I felt like that was a good thing for us to do. I know Moshe talked in here. It was there's a lot of comments. So thank you guys so much for all the comments.
You guys are getting a lot of love.
We'll get on them. But yes, I mean, there has to be some way to break the score down. Kind of like what we had said, either two scores or 4 scores or whatever. But the way we did it for the virtual forms tour, Marcel, with the judge, I thought that is the right type way. It's very similar to how we did it in the NBL the last 2 years that it was around, was breaking it down. So that way you knew that this is what you're focusing on, and everyone can kind of really give a score for that area, in there.
But that would assume then that the people who are sitting in those chairs aren't. I mean,
exactly.
I know this is going to sound. I'm going to use myself. I don't know half the stuff that Ben Jones does, but I can tell you everything technical that he's not doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And you go, okay, well, what am I going to look at? I'm going to look at all the technical stuff that he's not doing, but is that really the most important thing? So you would have to educate me as a judge in that system to go, is that really important? And you go, and I also happen to think that the World of Dance concept of 5 areas of concentration, and those are very clearly defined, and it's out of a score of 100, and you get some average of the 5 scores. So you could be breakdancing helmet guy that used to compete in the 2000s that was like terrible martial arts, but amazing stuff. You're like, wow, crazy stuff. But you're like, you can't throw a punch out of a paper bag, but right? Like you're like that guy.
I almost forgot about that.
Wearing a bike helmet in the middle of a karate tournament, and you're like, just wait, he's gonna do some crazy stuff, and you're like, okay, but I think that's the kind of thing where you look and you go, well, in today's world, would he do well?
With the right criteria, you can judge those things. Like talk about Ben Jones again. You can still identify speed, power, clean lines, stability, balance. And then if you have that, you can put an extreme form next to a traditional form. And now it's not, I prefer extreme or I prefer traditional. It's
who had this, who had the exactly.
That's exactly to Lauren's point earlier, how you can have someone of a certain age do traditional against CMX and blow, because blow up in a good way, right? And so, speed, power, intensity, technique, those are the 4 basic criteria that I focus when I teach and when I judge. Speed, power, intensity, technique, because it doesn't matter the form or format of the competitor. Those are physical characteristics, right? And so you have that person that, I lost her traditional. That I love seeing, because I'm willing to correct it. I love seeing the deer in headlights from a CMX person that lost to a traditional and they don't know what they have to work on, because they didn't get beat by somebody that had more tricks. They didn't get beat by somebody that did an extreme form. They got beat by someone that's doing a completely different format that they're not training and they don't compete with, right?
That is the world.
That's where you're not comparing the speed of your chop punch to their single punch, right? And so it's just like, if you've worked on the physicality, we're all human beings, right? You do know you were slower in your execution. You did a 5-hit combo in CMX, but no individual technique was faster than that traditional individual technique. You did do a front kick into a jump front kick. The basic front kick on the ground was not as strong, fast, high, or technical in execution as the basic front kick in that person that was going down the middle doing, their traditional form, right? And so I think maybe that's where that loss in translation part, what I was talking about before, people aren't evaluating what their deficiencies are and making those assets instead of liabilities, in addition to learning the tricks and evolving and being creative, right? Because these tricks are insane that people have. That's because they care to get them. They care more about learning the trick than they care about perfecting technique or striving for perfection.
Which,
right?
Alex,
because
I think
you cannot do half these tricks without being gifted. I got to give everybody credit. You cannot do it without being gifted, talented, and working at it. You just can't pop up 1 hour a week. Give me a break, right? So how come somebody can do these tricks with such great execution skill in a form, in a confined space, but they cannot chop with their thumb tucked in?
Right. Which I think goes back to something Alex said right in the beginning of like one of the many points that we've kind of ADD'd our way out of this idea of like,
that's me.
Yeah, I know all about it, man. All of us crowdy people, we have it in us. We may not be taking meds for it, but we all got it. So, and I think this is an important thing because I think it goes back to this idea of I have to do this to win. And my biggest thing as a bow practitioner, because that's what I spent 99.9% of my time doing is, but I get fixated on something. I get fixated on one of those pillars. And the biggest one I see is speed. And you go, it's speed with execution and power, not speed instead of execution and power. And with bow, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to see because I'll look at a kid and I say it all the time and go, you do realize you're hitting for sound, right? And they look at me like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it means that the first chance that the weapon got to touch your body, it made a sound. So your hand's not where the target's supposed to be, or it exceeded the target, or whatever it is, but it didn't even come close. And I'm not saying by any means was that something that I was perfective at, but I think that was something that having grown up under a Bernardo and under a Casey, it was the thing we spent the largest amount of time doing, which is why when I watch somebody's form, I look and I go, nope. Yeah. I'm like, I will never, like, I frequently say it, and I've said it a couple times. I don't know if Ronnie Presley or Eric Rudolph will ever see this, but they've frequently laughed while putting me in a ring. I'm like, why are you going to make people hate me? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that sits in the ring and is so different than everybody else here.
Lauren,
because
Lauren should write the rule book.
Be like, oh God, this is so terrible. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the guy that gives you the 6, but I can't in good conscience give you anything higher than that because I see things that apparently nobody else is seeing.
We have to write
like with that, like when you mentioned Jerry Fontenez, how he was stuck and he's like, I don't know what to do.
I know.
We just gave everybody the same score, right?
Yeah.
That happens so often because literally nobody planned on having Jerry Fontenez judge that division. They didn't have a judge, and they were like, Jerry, you've been around karate tournaments for 40 years. Here, come on in. Yeah. You should handle this no problem. It's that kind of person. Right. I would be that kind of person. You should not put me in a form division like that. You shouldn't. Right. You just should never.
There's so much at stake.
Judge, a certified judge.
There's got to be a certification. There has to be.
But you would be willing to say that, Alex, and you have said that. I know I've said, no, thank you. Yeah. Right. But the culture is different, and people. Right. I mean, people are malicious. I'm not. Yeah. I mean, why not tell people the truth, right, about themselves? Right. There are people that want to get a leg up. Oh, I'll judge. Sure, no problem. And come on, don't do that to yourself.
I don't think that it should be a thing that students, competitors, or parents ever ask a judge, "What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" Yada yada yada. I don't think that should be a thing.
I like. Isn't that a rule though that they aren't supposed to engage with the judges?
No. They tried to make it a rule, but it never stuck because everyone was like, "How can you take this away from me?" And it was like, if you were smart business people, you would set it up so that the only person who can actually have that conversation is the qualified coach,
right?
Which we don't have.
We don't do that. Yep.
Because then, and again, I know I brought him up already, but I look at someone like a Jarrett Liker and I look at the WKF system and I go, kudos to them because I had to make an investment to become a coach to train people to go to this level. I can't just be some Joe Blow,
That's a good point.
Point in case, Lauren Kearney, could not show up at a tournament and be like, but don't you know who I am? And this is what I've done. And they're like, I don't care. You got to know the formalities of what's expected of you as a coach.
Yep.
And if that means, and this is TV 101, we've tried for years to do this with the US Open. It fails miserably every time. But you look and you go, if that means as a coach that whether we paid for that badge or we gave you that pass, you cannot get on stage with your team members in joggers and a t-shirt.
Right.
It's not allowed. You can't do it. And you go, what do you mean? And you're like, hey, you need to hold yourself to a standard that is exceeding of what we're doing right now because you wear that badge. And you're okay with that if you make that investment. But you're not okay with that if you're like, well, anybody can willy-nilly be that. And there's just, from a structural standpoint, there's a lot of things that could be done because I think going back to what Jeff said about having karate schools is you look and you go, the average school is looking at this going, I don't want my kids to go because if they have a terrible experience, I lose money. You don't lose money. I do. And you go, hey, I don't know how to fix that. There's a small percentage of kids, I think, in every school that are like, okay, well, what's next? And you go, you could just keep going for degrees. And they're like, what? That's it? And you're like, yes. But, and that introspection, I think, comes out a lot in people, specifically in this chat where you look and you go, but how do I get better?
Well, I know why those schools do that.
Culture and curriculum.
Yeah.
To talk about the team thing. Yep. And I will say, yes, there were schools that went and had teams, but to a Paul Mitchell, to an infinity, right? Intensity, to a pro rank. Not pro rank wasn't a school. Paul Mitchell is not a school, but you guys train together, right? Elite wasn't a school, but there was some training together.
Right.
The reason why that
National Karate.
Say it again.
National Karate.
Yeah. The reason, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong or provide feedback. In my opinion, the reason why that school or that instructor says I'm not going to endorse a tournament because if there's a bad experience, I'm going to lose that student. I think schools, unfortunately, their curriculum and culture is to engage in sport karate. I could go to the Bow of Atlanta as a Joe Corley student and get whooped at that sport karate tournament and not care because Joe Corley was teaching me to defend myself.
Right.
Our forms to get your black belt had nothing to do and had no correlation or relativity to the sport martial arts form, right? I think the students that are in schools don't respect the martial arts, right? That's like a jiu-jitsu student going to a sport martial arts tournament and getting whooped by a blitz and being like, you know what? And the jiu-jitsu instructor's like, man, they had a bad experience, at New England Open. I'm going to lose them. Like, no, your student wasn't able to delineate the curriculum of your jiu-jitsu program compared to sport martial arts. You're probably not the best instructor, right? So why is that apprehension or hesitation even there in the first place, right? Like, I have a black belt Ketsugan. That's the same style as the Rays, Jesse, Kodak, and Jotty. It has no relativity to sport martial arts, right? And so we're learning to grapple, we're learning self-defense, we're learning to defend ourselves. And it doesn't matter what a NASCAR World Tour or national tournament results in. It has no blemish on the core curriculum of the martial art we're practicing. Too many students don't go to class anymore. They don't spar. They can't defend themselves. Their moral compass is corrupt. They don't have a certain character, about themselves, a winning, competitive driving mentality. They go to school to have a brick and mortar facility to practice that bow trick they learn.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
And they don't stay and teach and assist. And if you get good, they say if you get good at articulating and edifying people on something, you're going to get better at it yourself. If somebody were to assist in a class and teach someone a front stance in traditional form, or chop, a punch, a block, they're probably going to do theirs better. Let's ask how many people put sweat equity into the school that provided them their black belt.
Right.
Probably minuscule, but I was a full-time instructor at Welch Martial Arts. I taught 3 days a week at 14, doing team excellence, so I just don't know, I think that's probably why that mentality is, I'm not going to endorse sport martial arts because I'm unfortunately training my student base to do that. So I'm going to have them do the local circuit.
No, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it, Marcel. I think the reason why they're not doing that, the reason why they don't want to promote, like, let's just say the Battle of Atlanta, like, oh, I'm not going to have them go there because they're going to have a bad experience. That's not the reason why. That's not the reason why that instructor is not telling them to go to that big tournament, is because if they go to that tournament, they'll lose. But then now the student has two eyes.
Yeah.
If they got two eyes, all right, they have two eyes. They'll be able to see what good martial arts looks like. Now they'll go back, and now that instructor is exposed. They can't let that student go there and expose themselves. So they do what Lauren was saying, like, let's just go for more degrees. Let's just do that. Let's keep everything in house. Let's just shield you here. So that way you won't actually see what it's really like. I'll keep you here. We'll do an intramural tournament. Look, you're the best. You're the champion. But they would never actually get a chance to get the wool pulled over their eyes and pulled from over their eyes and really see what real good sport martial arts looks like.
No, I think I said the same thing. I said, like, if they go, they're going to realize that instructor sucks. It's not good. But it's the same thing, though. But once again, I still think that my point has some validity in the sense that sport martial arts is not traditional shooting. Sport martial arts is not traditional.
True.
Right. It needs to be. It's two different systems. It really is.
You shouldn't conflict the two, and that's the problem. You should not go to a Battle of Atlanta and get beat in CMX and then prejudge, criticize, or scrutinize your school who doesn't have that as their curriculum. Right. Exactly. Why would you do that? That your logic isn't. Your logic is off base, right? And so you're helping that instructor shouldn't want to shield you. You're like, hey, go. You see why we don't do Korean? We're a Japanese school. Why would you go compete in the Korean division? Idiot. You know what I'm saying? So
I think it goes back to what he's saying of like, hey, you got to edify these people of like, hey, this is why this is or isn't a good idea. And it all comes down to education of like, You're not going to go to a judo tournament if you're in a jiu-jitsu school. Like that just doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I think what Alex is saying is true. Is a lot of, I mean, and I get it because there's no arguing it. Kids today, erroneous of karate. Kids, and I think it stems from parents, but kids and parents are just a completely different phenom of people. The way they think, the way they look at things, the way they act. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that we've seen over the last year, it's just like culture as a whole has shifted. And that kind of opens this door to like, I can't force people to do the level of work that's going to require to do. And there's a motivational speaker and I can't think of who it is right now, but it's,
Alex Kingman.
Yeah, it's definitely him. It's one of those quotes where you're like, when you want to do this so much that you're willing to do it, even to go through the failure to get where you want to go, right? It's that Gary Vee approach of you have to fall in love with the process. And I see it now in a completely different professional world with law enforcement where I go, oh my God, these people have forgotten the process. I forget it sometimes because you're like, I'm this big dude. And you go, yeah, but do you remember who you were in the beginning? And I think that's a big part of this is this whole idea of like, but I see Jackson in his place right now. And I go, God, I'm not even close. And you go, but we were all that kid. Like I have literally the exact same story as Jackson, but we're 15 years apart, where it was like I was sitting at the US Open and I saw all these amazing people, different names, and I was like, that's going to be me someday. And then 10 years later, 4 years later, 5 years, whatever that time frame it was, because it was like, I'm not going to stop until I get it. Yep. And I don't know that I'm not saying that's not everybody, but I do think as a collective whole, there are a lot of people that are like, I don't want to be told I'm not good in anything ever. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I think the biggest thing sport karate has given me is I'm like, tell me I'm not good, because the only way I'm going to find the best version of myself is if you tell me. Like, I love reading these comments because I'm like, hey, tell me that what I'm saying is crazy. I'm okay with that. Like, sport karate gave me a thicker chin. And my brother.
Every martial arts class should teach that. Every martial art at its core has that value. Instructors and schools have to make that a point.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
You could send your kids to a tournament and they can win lose and have a great experience, and you don't lose them.
100%.
Prepare them properly, not just physically, but mentally.
Exactly. It's you got to pre-frame it. You got to pre-frame it for them, and with everything. So,
we talked about that. I agree. Like I remember I said the parents. I don't think it's an indictment. It's just it's my reality. Our parents treated us and fostered us differently, than these students. I think there's a lot of counterproductivity that's taking place. Our message is not synchronized with the parents' message, right? I'm not saying we're saying our student was bad or they're not good and the parents saying they are. I don't think it's that elementary. I think we are pointing out areas that need to be improved on. And then what's happening is they're getting this very buffered, soft, you're doing this good, you just try it again, right? And I think there's some counterproductivity there because I'm having to go back too often and too frequently with too many different people and keep saying the same thing. Yep. And then, and the students, they're educated, they're smart, but why more than a year later am I saying the same thing? Something's not syncing. There's some counterproductivity there. And it's not that their peer convinced them otherwise. Their parental figure did, right? The people that they live under their household. And obviously we know our place. We're not going to engage in an argument or be combative with another adult. The parents are our age, maybe 10 years older. We're not going to spend time doing that. That's proper, with that.
10 years younger.
So, 10 years younger, older, it is what it is, right?
Yeah. Dude, give me the red pill. I don't want to hear things like that. What's wrong with you?
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, hold on. We gotta get, all right, we're going to do 3 minutes. All right. We gotta wrap this thing up. But one of the things too with that, Marcel and Mike and all of us, what we talk about is what we say in the school. The parents are on their phone, or they're not even in there. They're not involved in it, So it's completely different now, I know our parents were right there, not on the mat, but right there and making sure they knew exactly what the sensei said. So that way they could encourage us at home and not tell us, because what I get is the opposite. I get, oh, you know what? You shouldn't listen to him. I think you're doing great. Well, that's what I hear from some students, you know what I mean? And the parents, you see that. And those are the ones that cause the problems, And I think we see a lot of that as well. And that's where we see people kind of like what we talked about. They go to the term, they say, you know what? They're not doing this. We're taking you out and we're going to this person. Oh, I don't like this. This is as far as you can get with this person. Let's go with them. And it's just this whole, let's just take them around the country, And so again, you don't really get to be your best. You know what I mean? It's like learning 30 different styles, but never really being a black belt in any of them. Right. We're in that, so I see that a lot.
All right. I got a question here. Of the 5 of us here, I realize I'm the 6th best forms competitor. Right. So
that's not good,
but I got a question. So I find this very interesting. Jeff, you're not involved in this because Jeff hates team forms. All right.
Jeff, what?
He says, I hate team forms. No, I hate doing team forms.
Okay.
But
he left.
Yeah, and he left. See,
now he's the seventh best person. That
See, this is what happens. See, he needs to stop with these questions because then he freezes up.
God don't like ugly.
Yeah. Oh man.
So I mean, so while he's not there, I'm just throw this idea in there. Is I think it'd be nice to go back to a time, which I know will never happen, where technology wasn't impeding us on growing as martial artists. Because I do think, as much as it's been a blessing, which I think really circles back to what Mike said at the beginning, my ADD is kicking back in, and I'm like, oh, he said this in the beginning. It's a blessing and a curse. Is this idea of being so technologically engaged, right? We all said it. Like, I mean, I did lessons with Casey at tournaments, and then I would go visit her like maybe 1 or 2 times a year. But the work was predominantly done by me. It wasn't done by any of these other people. And that's not really there anymore, right? Like, I know people that are coaching like 4 and 5 times a week, and you're like, why are you seeing this person more than once? Like, why are you? Especially in an off season, like, why are you not working with them? Like, hey, here's your homework, go do it. Send me a video.
So many students that don't need private lessons, they just get to work.
Yep.
Yeah, just do the work, guys. Like, go home and do the homework. And it's like, oh, I can't do the homework without a buddy. And you're like, what?
What? Yeah. There's always an excuse. Yeah. There's always an excuse, and I think we're letting everyone get away with excuses now. That's something that happens a lot. I always say, don't let the butts hold you back, because everyone's going to say, oh, well, I would have won, but this happened. Or I could have done this, but this happened. Or, well, that's just because they do that and I don't do that. Stop. Just be you and just be the best you. All right, Alex, let's finish.
What's your question that made you jump off the internet?
No, my laptop died. So, I know. Can you believe
that was his way of building suspense. I've got a question for everybody.
All right, so here's what it was. I find it so interesting that you guys, the 3 of you, had just really iconic team forms.
Yes.
Right?
Ah, snap.
And I just thought, Lauren, if you and Casey competed against Mike and Jeff Sprigco, competed against Marcel and Cal Menchoka, and you guys competed, tell me that wouldn't just be epic, but who would win?
You mean right now?
Right now?
No, not now. Like your form, when you guys did that form.
We did compete against each other.
We did compete against each other.
And Calvin and Marcel won most of the time.
Yeah. Calvin and Marcel won most of the time.
I didn't say that, but I appreciate it, though. I appreciate it.
You did. It was like, man, it was rough. It was fun because it was like, ooh, I don't know. I think Jeff and Mike's form was just timeless. Actually, I would say that pretty much about everybody's form is there's right. You look at it now and you're like, they're timeless forms. And I guess getting back to guys, that those things don't exist right now. You're like, there's not really any form I see right now that I'm like, ooh, in 10 years, I'm going to be excited to come back and watch this.
Well, talking about something that doesn't exist. Lauren, we've never seen what you and Casey did before or since.
I've never seen it. No, I'm just kidding. We've worked on it a couple times. We actually did 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, I went to Canada because we had it in our minds that we were going to go to Quebec for the 40th and try and compete. And we tried really hard. We tried to come up with a one bow, one open hand 2.0. And I will be the first person to say that it was really hard because I don't do karate as much as I used to do it. And even though she's probably in better shape than she was when she was 17, at almost 41, she'll be 41 on Saturday, I think.
Happy birthday, Casey.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you look and you go, it was the ring rust is a real thing. I mean, it was fun. And the biggest thing with it was we knew that there was an element of choreography, which I don't see anymore, that it was like the music is going to be the most important part to this. And we couldn't find the style or the music that would make what we were trying to accomplish really happen. But I mean, the way that form came together was a fluke. It was fast story.
It was cool.
What happened was Matt got hurt and we were going into Diamonds and we called up Steve and said, Steve, Matt's hurt. There's not going to be a team at Diamonds. Julie's not going to be happy. Fly me to Canada. We'll make it happen. You just got to get me there. And we had talked on the phone, which by the way, this is like 2004. So calling Canada at this point is almost impossible.
And I was on your phone.
Yes.
There were no international planes yet. They were like, you're not going to call out the message.
Yeah.
We had to go through an operator who said, don't you know? But we had like a couple of like literally composition book ideas. And it was like, hey, if this doesn't work, we're going to go back to the old idea because we used to do teams and we'll just go back to that. And she had kind of thrown some ideas at me. So it was really her idea that she was like, what if we did this? And I was like, oh my God, this could be super cool. And I think that's another thing. We spent basically an entire weekend living at their karate school between classes and working out. Wow. And in 4 days, we got the first version of it done. Music cut, the whole shebang. And we went into Diamonds early and tried to like clean it up. And it still didn't look good. It was like, oof, this is rough. So the 2005 version was like one more week of working on it. But it was a fluke. It was like, this would never have happened if Matt wasn't hurt. So it's kind of crazy how it came together.
Wow.
So Matt's injury was your benefit.
Well, yeah, because Daniel was going to be at the I don't remember what he did. I think he pulled a groin. And he wasn't going to be at Diamonds. And that was a big thing, right? Like Paul Mitchell created Synchronize. That was Julie's thing. She like pulled it out of thin air and said, I got an idea. Let's do this. I think it's TV worthy. I think it'll be a big thing. Is
that really where it came from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She pulled it out of thin air and was like, yeah, I think you guys should do this. I think it would be a really cool idea. And they were like, okay. So originally the idea is that it was only for adults because Paul Mitchell was paying the $1,000. And it was like, you could have a adult and a little kid, but you can't have anybody under the age of 18.
Can't have kids.
Right.
No. And then somewhere in the 2000s, that stopped because she wanted it to not be like Matt Comiskey and Ida won because they were cute, not because they were good, which was never the case, right? They were good and they were cute, but it wasn't, one shouldn't supersede the other. It should be you won because you were awesome, not people think you won because you were cute. So she was somewhat TV savvy of that and was like, no. If we're going to have little kids competing against adults, it has to be kind of across the board. So the only reason that came up is because we were like, she's not going to be happy if we show up at Diamonds and we don't have this. And he said, okay.
Everything happens for a reason. There was a fluke. I started doing Team Sync with Steve Torres first.
I was going to say, Steve Torres form was dope.
And then he stopped. So, then, I asked Kalman to join. So there's that fluke right there. But early on, to kind of respond back to what you said, Alex, one of the primary reasons, literally and seriously, as to why I chose not to do certain moves that other people did was I respected my competition. And I have to be honest, I don't think the modern day competitor respects their competition. The reason why you see so much commonality is people think they can do what other people are doing. They think they can do it better than them, right? I respected Mark Canizato's flash kick and the height of Steve's flash kick and their creativity to that corner. And I respected it enough to call it what it was, better than mine. I liked how Kim Do would put things together in creative. And so I was like, maybe focus on getting your illusion twist really, really good and not being, 2 or 3 combos in and be okay. So and I'll tie this back to the sync. I love competing against, anybody in sync, Mike and Jeff, Lauren, Casey, Matt, Daniel. I respected the quality of the competitor and what they brought to the table. And the thing also that I think we should give ourselves credit for, you guys deserve credit, is, we've done Team Sync and Team Demo in competition, right? And other people do it too. Not saying they don't have this thought process, but I really do think our generation respected wholeheartedly talent and competition, right? I did Team Sync with Steven Torres. He left. Then I did it with Kalman. How do you jump so quick? Because I respected both their skill sets. Steven couldn't trick to save his life. Kalman could do whatever you asked him to do, right? How were you able to bring it together? Because they all respected me as well and understood that, right? Mike, what you've been able to do with your team, what you've been able to do with the chain of schools, right? You respect the art, and I believe your students respect your instruction, right? Lauren, the development you have of Paul Mitchell talent and over the generations and an influence, I really want people to respect martial arts for what it is, respect their instructors and their curriculum for what it is. Do not conflate your school curriculum and sport martial arts. Stop doing that, right? Don't go to a tournament, get whooped, and go crying to your instructor who has never competed before in NASCAR, right? I think this competitor needs to get the arrogance out their butt, right? And when they see somebody do something that beat them, stop trying to get that move. Get better at what you're doing, all right? Tiger Woods doesn't change his swing to be like the person that beat him. And the people that are losing to Tiger Woods didn't change their swing, right? They literally tried to get the ball out there longer and perfect their stroke. You have different body, you have different mechanics, but there's, rudimentary style. And I just think the culture needs to change. Period.
Awesome. Hey, guys, thank you all so much. We got to wrap this up. We can go on and on and on. This was so cool.
We will. This is
a lot
only
of fun.
The first one. We're going to do a second one.
Yeah, we will. And, I mean, I'm sure Alex and I have more just to even talk about with this and what all we did. Thank you guys so much.
I think Alex's head exploded at least 3 different times.
Oh, my gosh.
Of course.
You know what the stupidest thing ever is? Today is my mom's birthday.
All right.
And I didn't say happy birthday on the air.
Well,
there you go.
Happy birthday, Alex's mom. And I'm going to say a happy birthday to John Sue a day late because he turned 40 yesterday.
That makes sense why out of 5 people, he's the 6th best.
There you go.
I get it.
That was a great one, Marcel. Happy birthday.
All right.
I want to say, guys, it was a really good conversation. I appreciate and I love these kinds of conversations. I love watching the comments on the side. There's a couple people I saw, like Vince Cohen, who I've known for Jesus, crazy. I don't even want to know. But
a ton of
it's, I think it's great to see that there are people who literally love this sport, despite the number of years they've been doing it, that are like, look, at the end of the day, we just want to see it get better. So kudos to you, Jeff and Alex, for providing a platform for people to listen, for everybody here for kind of coming and saying, hey, like, we know that it's not perfect. We know what we say isn't the right thing, but we got to have a conversation. We got to come up with a plan. We're not just complaining. We need to come up with some actual steps here. So
people are going like and love crazy on this right now. They're just, you guys are getting all sorts of love.
I love it. Thank you, guys.
Hit the hearts.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. See you guys next week. Thank you, guys.